HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Today's program was brought to you by Alto Adige wines, wines from the Italian Alps. For more information, visit altoadigewines.com.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. I recently traveled to northern Italy to visit the Alto Adige wine region, also known as Sud Tyrol or South Tyrol, near the Swiss and Austrian borders at the foothills of the Dolomites. The Alto Adige is one of the smallest wine-growing regions and has also become one of the country's top white wine regions. This unique alpine landscape is ironically kissed by the hot Mediterranean sun in the summer. Many of the vineyards are planted on hills and steep mountainside altitudes, producing fresh and aromatic wines. Along with the wine estates, there are over a dozen cooperatives successfully representing thousands of small wine growers in the region. The focus is towards quality, not quantity, working with over 20 varietals, including some of the best Pinot Bianco, Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Gewürztraminer, Schiava, and Lagrein you will ever taste. We were based out of Bolzano, the largest city of South Tyrol and the capital. We visited, dined, and tasted wine with over a dozen wineries and cooperatives. I will let the wine people of the Alto Adige tell their story. This is a 2-part series, and this is part 2. On this episode, we'll be talking to Clemens Alois Legator, proprietor Alois Legator Estate, Werner Waldboth, Abbazia di Novicello, and Judith Unterholzner, Gumphof. I'd like to thank the EU. This campaign was financed by EU Regulation 1308/2013. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. We are in the Alto Adige region in northern Italy, also known as Sud Tyrol. We'll be touring the entire region and speaking with different wineries. Our guest is Clemens Alois Legator. Did I do Alois right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You sure? Because I've been screwing it up all week.
Yeah, it's not that
It's
easy.
not a good look for me. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Clemens Alois Legator is the proprietor of his family's Alois Legator winery. He is part of the 6th generation of this wine family, dating back to the early 1800s. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Clemens.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so first tell me, just so people know who the hell we're talking to and where are we in the Alto Adige?
So we are in the very southern part of Alto Adige.
Okay.
It's a small, very idyllic place called Magre. It's a very small town.
The town is Magre, Magre.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
On the Dolomitic limestone here.
Okay, we love limestone,
Yeah.
right? All right, so let's get into you a little, and then we'll get into the winery. Let's let people understand who you are. So my understanding was you spent many years abroad before you came back to run the winery. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah.
What were you doing? Were you wine related, education,
Both.
other pursuits?
Both. I started with actually sociology.
Okay.
So starting in Zurich with sociology, and I studied it for 3 years. It's super studies. I learned a lot, especially sociology, philosophy about
good
society.
topic.
And it's a good topic, and I think
right.
also when running a winery, you deal with people, and it's always a good. I learned a lot, I would say. But afterwards, I went to Geisenheim, which is a viticulture school in Germany. I stayed there for a year, and afterwards I went to Dijon, to Burgundy. So it was an exchange
What
year.
in Dijon? A school or
A wine school, yes, the DNO. And then after a couple of months, I quit the studies because
quit in Dijon?
yes, because I didn't want to. Yeah, I was eager to dive into practical
that makes
work
sense.
in a certain way, and so I
So you
continued.
wanted to get on with it
In a certain way, yes.
Yeah.
I was a little bit impatient
Not to
about
screw
it.
off and do something else.
And so I stayed there working for Marquis d'Angeville, which is a small winery in Volnay, a biodynamic winery. And it was super fun time. And then I went to New York.
So you went to New York. What year are we talking now? Just
I think it
ballpark.
was 2013, something like that.
Okay, so almost
something
10
like
years
that.
ago.
Yeah, nearly.
Yeah.
And there I got some experience as working on a wine market, selling wine. The
business side.
A little bit of the business side, yeah.
Did
I
you
think
work for
New York is a
importers
tough-
or distributors?
Correct, yeah.
Or?
I worked for Martin Scott, nowadays Winebow, at the time. And I tried to
Who is
understand.
now your
Distributor, yes.
So that
Yes, so
gave
we-
you a good perspective now for the business, for the family.
Absolutely, and to understand also. I mean, New York is one of the most challenging, probably wine market. So it was a good learning curve.
Did you enjoy New York, or couldn't wait to get out, or you?
No, I
it was just
enjoyed-
time to get back
No,
to the
I
family.
enjoyed
You
New
did,
York
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And so after New York, I haven't been moving back. Actually, I went back to Luxembourg, and in Luxembourg, I worked in a food cooperative for biodynamic products, and to learn the whole aspect of biodynamics. So not only focusing on wine, but also to understand how vegetables or grain is produced and sold. And it was a very interesting experience. And I stayed there for 2 years.
Tell me one thing. People now shift towards organic foods. We'll talk about it a little, but in wine you have, your regular farming, organics, biodynamics. On the food side, is biodynamics like wine, where it's the next level from organics as far as how the growers grow the produce, fruits?
Yes, actually, it's always yes, absolutely. It's actually, I would say, it's diving a little bit deeper into the topic, into trying to create a closed organism, trying to create diversity.
Right.
And I think yes, same thing actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
To make the ecosystem,
Correct, yes.
That universe bigger.
Yeah,
Permaculture, whatever.
Correct.
Yeah. That's interesting because you don't hear about that much.
In food.
Yeah, not as much as I would like to
in
hear.
wine, probably.
Yeah.
And it depends where it's in.
Do you think more in Europe than in the States?
I don't know. There's a certification which is called Demeter. I don't know how strong
For
Demeter. Also for food.
Oh,
It's
it
the
is.
same,
It is the same.
So I don't know how strong Demeter food is in the US. In Germany, it's quite strong.
Rarely see it. So,
Rarely seen it.
Yeah. But
Italy and Germany is quite important. Switzerland also important. So yeah.
All right. So 2 years there. Then what happened?
And then I moved back. Then I felt that the time was right to come back to the family winery. And so I joined the family winery in 2015. And at that time, I split in a certain way with my father the responsibilities. Yeah, sorry. And so I was coming in, joining the winery, starting to get responsible for the whole market side, to have the possibility to travel around, meet the importers and the partners we're collaborating with, and slowly I took over all the other
Responsibilities.
and responsibilities
So
from
does
my
that
father.
include the vineyards and winemaking?
Correct. That was a little bit later. So 2018, I started with that.
So
And,
tell me your involvement with the winemaking. I mean, are you making the wine? Are you working with a winemaker?
So
Out in the field, you're
So
working
my
with.
father did the cool thing before I joined the winery in 2015. My uncle, who was the winemaker for I think 46 years, till 2013.
Is that your dad's brother or your
No,
mom's
my
brother?
my uncle is the husband of my dad's sister.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your
And
uncle.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so he retired in 2013 after 46 years. And so it was time to find a new winemakers team in a certain way. And so my father already, as I've been at that time already in Geisenheim at the viticulture school, he gave me the responsibility already that before joining the winery to say, okay,
Great.
you decided to come in a couple of years, so it's your turn also to find your winemaker in a certain way. And I was lucky enough that I was just leaving Geisenheim, and I met Jo, one of my best friends till today, and I asked him to join the winery in 2014. And before that, in 2013, there was already our professor for biodynamic viticulture joining the winery
mentioned
in
that
2013,
earlier. Yeah.
correct? And so I had the possibility to contact them, to convince them to move to Alto Adige. And so that's why I'm very much involved with winemaking. I'm very much involved with strategically winemaking, but I'm not on a daily
you
business. I have also sometimes I need to travel in a certain way.
Did your friend have a background in wine, or he
Yes, of
started?
course.
But
Before he came to Geisenheim,
he kind of grew into the field with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
so that was, of course, a huge advantage because we met each other in Geisenheim, and during the studies we already understood. Okay, we are thinking about wine in a similar way, and that's why, of course, it was easy.
Perfect.
And also nowadays, it's very easy to trust him to know. Okay, if I'm not there doing the blends or thinking about wine, I absolutely know that he's doing the right thing.
so I want to ask you two things. The first is your relationship with your dad, and is your sister involved?
I have two sisters. They are
Two
both
sisters.
involved. Yes.
They are both involved. I thought one was. So
Yeah,
they all have different responsibilities.
Let's say in the wine business, you're right that my younger sister is more involved.
Okay.
But we have, for example, just this weekend on the 1st of April, we have Summa. Summa is a wine fair with
I didn't know that, and then when I was coming out here, just doing a little research, it's just an amazing lineup. It's Saturday, right?
Yeah, it's on Saturday. Saturday, Sunday, yes. And so
Christian Schied, I mean, all these
Correct,
cool guys, you know.
And we invite always 100 wineries to our winery.
How long have you been doing that?
20 years.
That is awesome.
So in our estates, we have approximately 100 wineries. And I mean, you need a lot of organization for that. And
Is
that's
it a salon, a fair, a walk
Correct, yeah.
around tasting thing?
Correct, yeah.
And then everyone is in town partying for
Correct.
2-3 days. That's
Yeah,
a fun
correct,
time,
yeah,
right?
it's a fun time
for you, yeah.
Especially for such a nice small
All right, so back
city.
to your sister. So technically, what is she doing?
And so the older sister, she's organizing this important event. So she has an event agency, but she's organizing all those kind of major events what we have. And then, so she's less involved maybe in the wine business, but my younger sister is. So Helena is, she's responsible for certain markets. She's responsible for marketing, and she's also responsible for our restaurant Paradise, which is here. We have a small lunch restaurant in Maghreb.
Is that where we are right
Correct,
now?
yes.
Okay. Now, your dad, does he step back? Does he still have a heavy hand? I mean, what's his involvement, and how do you and him work?
He did a super great job when let's say stepping back. He was always
Hard, right?
not easy, I think.
And you're
because,
saying
I
he
mean,
did a good job at it.
Yes, already when 2014. First of all, yeah, he gave me the responsibility to find a new winemakers team. So that's
He left it to you.
Absolutely.
Because you have to live with it.
yeah. So also 2014, before I joined the winery, he said, "Look, when you come in, I give you the whole from day one. You get my office and you take over the responsibility." And then I said, "No, that's a super nice thing, and thank you very much." But as after living abroad for 10 years, I was not able anymore to do that because I had to get to meet also the employees, to meet the partners, to know the vineyards again. So I said, okay, let's come on, let's divide the responsibilities, and that's why I had more time after the last 4 years to step in and to take over responsibilities. And he slowly stepped back, or actually faster than probably many people would have done it. But he's still involved with our vintner partners. So we have small wine growers we're collaborating with. And we started 2011 to trying to motivate them to organic and biodynamic
Because
farming.
those were his relationships.
His as well. Some of them
Yeah,
are
I mean,
quite
yeah,
long. We have long
right,
relationships with
he's
those.
worked with them
partners.
for years.
Yeah. And so he had a very important role in trying to motivate those partners towards organic and biodynamic farming. And thanks to his role and thanks to his work, we are able to, after next year on, so with next upcoming vintage 2024, we're going to have all 80 farmers converted to organic or biodynamic. And that's where he still has, he does a lot.
He's leading that
He's leading
charge.
that in a certain way, yeah. So that's every other responsibility he passed to us, but this is still something where we need him and we need his figure, because I think convincing someone or motivating someone to organic biodynamic, you need a lot of trust, and you need to take their fear. But that's the only thing. So farmers need to understand, it's not about the vine or the grape that needs to understand how to run organically or biodynamically. It's the farmer who needs to understand to look at the same vineyard from another perspective, and instead of herbicides, dealing with other things. No, and this is something what needs time and a lot of trust, and a lot of where you need to take their fears that they're not losing yields in a certain way. So that's a long educational process, which we started 2011 and gonna end it next year with everyone
With
being
the success you hoped for, right? I mean, basically you succeeded at.
Yes, and when we started with biodynamics in 2004 in our vineyards, we never would have thought that even one of those partners we would be able to convince, and now there are 80s.
Not to interrupt, but that's a good segue. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on it, but you have to give me a little history of the winery. Like obviously 2004, but we have to go backwards when things started, the generational thing. Don't spend a lot of time. Just get me to current as quickly as you can.
So 1823, the winery was founded. At that time, still we were trading wine. And then the first vineyards were planted in 1855. And so also the cellar and the winery was built in 1855. My father joined 74. My father was very important to also for the whole region to focus more on whites, focus on quality, because Alto Adige still at that time was...
So the shift over to whites, which everyone, we're out here talking to everyone. Your dad
was in
the middle of that whole change, because everyone tells you it was 60, 70%, Schiava or whatever, Vernage.
In those days, 90% of Schiava, 5% of Lagrein, and maybe the rest was white, no?
So keep going.
But that's why what he had to do. And then in the 90s, he started to experiment with organic and biodynamic. And then 2004, he was courage enough to convert all our 50 hectares of vineyards, so 130 acres, to organic and to biodynamic. Sorry.
When did you get certified? Did you get certified?
We got certified. The first vintage, I think, was 2007, because it always takes time,
soon after
3-4 years, and so yes.
Pretty soon. So you did a good job. You got me there quickly.
Yeah,
I think people understand. All right, so I think it's fair to say that your grandmother kind of set this direction of the mindset with this organic or thoughtful gardening, and she kind of instilled in everyone you could do this without, screwing around or whatever. So it's almost impossible not to sit here and talk to you and not talk about biodynamics. So you talked about your dad in 2004. I mean, what are like the inspirations, or why him and not someone else? Why then? I mean, there had to be something that touched him that said, listen, the best way to do this is this direction.
I mean, he of course he grew up with it in a certain way. As you said, my grandmother was gardening her vegetable garden with this old ideas of farming, pruning, lunar cycle, preparation, biodynamics. But it's a huge difference if you farm your garden, a small garden biodynamically, or 130 acres in a certain way.
Right.
So, but he grew up, and when he joined in 74, he always had in mind, okay, sooner or later, I would love to have all my vineyards biodynamically farmed. Just that in the 70s, as we talked just 5 minutes ago, there were other things to do in Alto Adige, so stepping towards quality, not quantity, towards white. So he gave himself a lot of patience, or he was a kind of patient to to do first of these quality steps, and then in the 90s to start with biodynamically farming or organically farming. But this was always in his head to switch sooner or later. But
His patience was important because to
Absolutely,
get
yeah.
there, it takes naturally time.
Yes, absolutely. And there was another producer in Alto Adige, Loacker, who
Spell
was
that for me.
Loacker, so Loacker.
Was a winery.
He was a
owner,
winery,
and
yes.
he was practicing.
And he was starting already in I can't remember, but I think in the 70s, 80s. So he even a little bit earlier than we did, he already started to experiment and convert to biodynamic, yes.
We have an expression called winging it, where you do something without looking at a manual or whatever. Did your grandmother wing it, or was she looking at Steiner stuff, or did she just feel that this is the right thing, or she was using some specific guidelines?
Probably she was reading a little bit of Steiner, but reading Steiner is so complicated and so complex. So I think she hadn't had a lot of fun doing that. So I think, but Steiner is also, he didn't invent the things completely new from new.
These practices.
His practice, lunar cycle, or of course, now it sounds very exotic and esoteric if we talk about certain cosmical influence, but also the sun is a cosmical influence. And of course, the moon has a certain cosmic influence and an impact. If you look at the tides and what is in a plant, it's water going up and down. Of course, also the moon has a certain impact on a plant, no? And back in the days, people used that knowledge, and this is something what was a little bit more forgotten about it. So it's those. Biodynamic is also a little bit based on those old traditions and knowledges which were actually
So let's talk about that.
normal.
So in a sense, it's like this self-contained microcosm, right?
Yes.
Biodynamics?
Doesn't need to be a microcosm, can be also the whole planet, but why not? But
It can?
yeah,
But in this world, we're talking about,
smaller ones, yeah.
but we're talking about the introduction of animals surrounding the vineyards.
I think we talk about a
the
healthy.
things that you do or had to do or introduced.
I think we talk about healthy agriculture. And healthy agriculture is always based on diversity. And a good farmer 100 years ago was a farmer who created diversity because he knew that only through diversity he is able to create fertility. And the only value, or one of the most important values we have as farmers, is in keeping and increasing fertility. That's what we need to think of. And can we do that? Increasing cover crops, using manure of animals. So what happened? I mean, where do you find in Napa or here in Alto Adige or if you go to Burgundy, where do you see a cow grazing in the vineyards or around it?
Goats, sheep, whatever, rare.
Rare, no? Yeah. So where do you take your organic fertilizer? So it was obvious that all of a sudden you were forced to use chemical fertilizer to feed your vines in a certain way, where you weren't focusing anymore on the soil, on the whole circumstances in a certain way. And I think this is all about biodynamics, destroying monoculture, increasing diversity in order to increase fertility, to have a healthy agriculture. And I hope that maybe in 10, 15 years, we'll not even need to talk about biodynamic anymore, but if it's permaculture, if it's biodynamic, if it's organic.
Not just here, I mean,
in general,
the whole valley, everywhere, yeah.
I think diversity is key
Fruits,
to a healthy...
vegetables,
correct.
Everything.
Diversity is key to a healthy agriculture, and I think we only should think about a healthy agriculture. And that's why also for us, we are having 25 cows grazing our vineyards. We gain manure through those cows, and we are able to increase.
Great pictures. I mean, don't you have bulls with horns?
Correct, yes.
I mean, there's everything.
And they're grazing there, and of course, thanks to them, we have our fertilizer back.
Right.
And with this,
and don't you create your own compost
correct, yes.
piles? I mean, rows of them, right?
We are creating our own gold again, and that's fantastic.
Right.
No?
Right.
And
because you've introduced.
Yes, and in a special agriculture where you normally deal with monoculture, you don't have this possibility anymore because you don't have cows.
Right.
So that's why I think this is trying to think back as a closed organism. This is why biodynamic is so interesting.
When people talk about regenerative farming, is that part of biodynamics, or within biodynamics, you also have to think about farming regeneratively and continue to do other things, or is it built in?
But I think biodynamic is a little bit more clear. because there's also a certification
Guidelines,
behind it.
it's-
There's a guideline behind it. There's a Rudolf Steiner, the founder, behind it. There's a philosophy behind it. But it's also, in a certain sense, it's also a regenerative farming. Yes,
Right. So it is.
It's
You're
also
practicing
here
with
healthy agriculture. In a certain way,
Right,
yes.
right. So you're kind of there. I think any normal person wouldn't argue with you that that's the right and the best thing to do. But some people may say, okay, that's great, but I like drinking your wines. What's the difference? What am I tasting? You know, you've practiced and toiled over biodynamics. How does that affect the wine I'm drinking? Literally tasting the liquid. How do you describe that?
I think I have to.
I mean, I know the answers, but I'm curious.
I think that wine is always, how can I say, multifactorial. So you have many reasons why certain things are happening. The biodynamic is not a magical stick that all of a sudden everything gets better or
No,
changes.
I'm not implying that.
But the thing is,
what does it? You know, or
I think it,
even if it's
it
a
helps
mindset,
you-
that's a good start.
It helps you to open up your horizon. You're changing your practices. You're changing approach. You're changing perspective, and at the very end, you're trying to fertilize your soil. You make your soil better. You make your soil healthier, more fertile in a certain way. And I think at the very end, opening up your mindset of increasing fertility, dealing with cows or sheep or whatever. Also, then in the cellar, not using added yeast, but indigenous yeast, not adding enzymes. I think you create at the very end a wine with an incredible character. And I'm not saying that there are no conventional wines out there with some fantastic characters. Absolutely not. But I think also here there are many things which are having an impact on how think and how make wine. But I think biodynamic helps open up
You
yourself.
use words like there's more energy or it's more lively. I mean,
I would say that
that's
many
kind of built into
many biodynamic wines are liveliest, maybe.
because listen, everyone you're going to talk to now says everything happens in the vineyard, and by practicing by bringing good fruit in.
Well, you can destroy a
putting
lot
it
in the cellar as well.
Well, no,
so
we
yeah.
didn't get there yet, but let's start with,
Yeah.
good fruit and all of that. So the biodynamic part, as you carry it in. So let's talk about cellar practices. So obviously you have this whole mindset when you get into the cellar, I'm guessing it's minimal intervention.
Mm-hmm.
You just said indigenous yeast.
So we still use a little bit of sulfur. To be honest, I'm not courage
I'm not
enough.
a anti-sulfur guy. You
I'm
do
not-
what you
I'm not-
have to, right?
We minimize it, yes, but
Right,
we still use it
consciously.
a little bit because, to be honest and to be, very honest, I'm not courageous enough to be completely sure
Zero
that the
sulfur.
wine is stable and the wine is the same, which goes out the cellar and arrives in New York, for example.
Right.
So we're still in a moment or in the phase where we're trying out to understand how we might be able to not use sulfur at all, but we're still not there yet. Also, the same thing is with filter. We still filter very softly our wines. Has also to do with stabilization and to getting more practice. I mean, we are very young.
Or just filter?
We find sometimes with bentonite,
Right.
and then softly filter. But I think also here, I think we are a very young team. We still
You're still feeling.
need to feel a little bit and to be 100% sure. But I'm definitely sure that sooner or later I would love to be there to have all my wines unfiltered, because I think it's the same thing with. What you can see with apple juice. I don't know how it was in US, but in here 10 years ago, everyone was drinking clear apple juice. Now, if you drink a apple juice here in the area, it's cloudy.
People look for clear. I mean,
Now here it's
just like
different, no?
organic food.
Because of
people
course, filtering it, you take also certain things out. So I would love to get there, but I'm still
People are
not
conditioned to that,
100%
too.
sure that it's stable enough.
Right.
Without adding any other products. I mean, you could add also other products, but that's not the purpose. So the only thing what we do is we, filter softly the wines and add a little bit of sulfur. Yes,
That's really it, right?
that's actually it.
Stainless
That's
steel,
all you
some
need.
oak.
Yes, depends on the wines. Yes.
Right.
But also here, when using oak, it's less than 10% is new oak. So the majority is oak is interesting for the structure, but not for the nose in a certain way.
I didn't cover this before, but we talked about it. The family owns, what is it, about 55 hectares? And then you partner with other
80 partners, yes.
80 partners, of which you just told me you are at the end of having them agree
Yes.
to farm
Organically or biodynamically, yes.
biodynamic. So everyone will be organic or
From
biodynamic.
next year on, everyone will be organic or biodynamic farming, yes.
How long did that take? Was that,
it
we
started
were talking your
2011
dad, right?
with our
So he was
partners.
literally wandering the earth of Alto Adige, convincing people.
In a certain way,
So
yes,
he's
yes,
done
yes,
in a
yes.
way,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's exciting. Listen, you and I could sit here and do a show on climate change for 2 hours. We're not doing that because it's about the winery, and I want to talk to you about your wines. But you guys seem to be very tuned into climate change. And sitting with you during the tasting, I learned that your dad, even in, what was it, the 80s or 70s, was sensitive to that. So a lot of your vineyards are high elevation, right? So
Not even that high.
So what are the things you could do, without spending a whole show on climate change? Think about different varietals, which you're doing, elevation.
I think, yes, elevation is very interesting. That's a luck what we have in Alto Adige, what you probably don't have in other areas, but we can go higher. And the highest vineyard is already on, I think, 4,000 feet nearly in Alto Adige, so quite high. So it's a huge range of different altitudes we can play with. And then there is thinking of new grape varieties. And as you mentioned, my father in the 80s started to get interested in climate change, planting grape varieties from southern parts. Assyrtiko or Tannat or Viognier, Petit Massin. So all these grape varieties. And then there's another important aspect. So the question is, what are we going to do with Pinot Grigio, Gewürztraminer grape varieties that are maybe a little bit suffering more the heat and
which are important and somewhat indigenous to the area.
They're planted, let's say, like this, and it takes ages to replant something. So the question is, what can we do with those grape varieties?
Where are you at with that? I mean, what can you do?
So here, for example, skin and stem contact is very important. So, for example, Poro, Pinot Grigio, our most important Pinot Grigio it's a blend of many different components. A wine is always a sum of many different components, but the three most important ones are the one component which was directly pressed, one component which was kept on skin contact for 15 hours.
Which we tasted.
Yes, and one was, for example, a component which was kept for 8 months in contact with skins and stems. And the tannins from the skins and the stems, they help you in a certain way to increase the perception of freshness. So it's like giving them the salt. It's like in the kitchen when you add salt or you set lemon juice to a dish in a certain way. Right. So it's very interesting. So naturally, you don't increase the acidity, but you increase the perception of freshness in a certain way, the perception of it.
What's interesting is we're talking about climate change and outside. You're talking about inside. You're talking about how introducing skin contact or leaving it 6 to 8 months on the leaf. Yeah. And now by blending it, you can, and those are reactions to climate change for that varietal?
For example, for many varietals, and we try out many things. So we did try out with Chardonnay or Pinot Noir is also grape variety. Also in Burgundy, it's nearly a must that you keep certain grapes or juices in contact with skins and stems. But I think especially here in our area for Pinot Grigio, it's quite important to use skin and stem contact if we want to guarantee also in future a certain freshness, a certain verticality and tension to our wines.
Right. All right, so before we finish up, let's talk about the wines. I'm not positive of this, but I understand you have 3 levels. Is it 3?
3 plus the comment who are wines.
So you have a
classical
grape varietal where you could do the most varietals and more
where
accessible
it's all
wines.
about diversity.
I'm not talking quality. I'm talking about the approach. Compositions.
So it's in the classical tier, it's all about diversity. So we try to get the best expression for Chardonnay using different parcels, different vintner parcels, different altitudes, different soil types. So it's all about using the diversity to get the best expression of, let's say, Chardonnay. In the composition tier, it's all about those components. So it's like someone who has already a certain experience with skin stem contact.
Right,
who
a
knows-
selection process where you'll
In a certain way,
recognize
yes,
that
correct.
guy and
Yeah.
you'll work.
Yes.
Is that partners and your vineyards?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So some of our biodynamic partners as well. And then in the highest tier, we call them masterpieces, but not that because we are arrogant to say that these are the best wines in the world, but it's like the approach of a master, trying to optimize and every single detail and to get every single detail to perfection in a certain way. So it's a little bit the approach, the apprentice, the journeyman, and the master in a certain way.
But to the point of the master, is the masterpiece line, is it all estate vineyards or not necessarily?
Yes, it's all estate.
So it's everything under your full control and how you approach it and all
yes.
that. And then we were sitting here and I knew about this and it was nice to experience. There's a line, Comet,
Yes, those
which
are the
is
wines.
kind of fun, is a little loose, but kind of an interesting, fun line. Tell me about that.
Well,
It's more serious than fun, is my point.
Yeah, it's actually quite serious because we have many questions, and we, as I mentioned, we are a young team having questions, and we need to find, and we want
That's
to
your
find answers.
experimental line?
That's our experimental line. We have every single year we make about 120 experiments. An experiment can be an experiment with a new grape variety for the area, or
Tell me
skin stem
something you're
contact.
working on now, that.
For example, this year we're gonna plant Carignan Gris, Carignan Blanc, which could be very interesting. That for the future.
You don't hear that around here.
No, actually, no. And so experiment can be grape varieties, experiment can be skin stem contact. So also, as I mentioned before, Boro Pinot Grigio, which was kept on skins and stems for 8 months, at the beginning was an experiment. Now it's a very important part of one of our most important wines.
Does that always keep climate change in the back of your mind?
As well,
You're
no,
doing
I mean,
that because
Conditions are changing, climate is changing, so we also need to adapt and we need to understand better, no? And if we don't want to add acidity to our wines, we need to understand how can we leverage certain characteristics naturally, So that's why we need to experiment a lot. And Comets are wines where we select every year between 5 to 10 experiments, which we bottle and then we share with our partners.
What kind of output, on one bottling is 300 cases? More?
300 bottles.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So 300 bottles.
Do they stay within the winery? Did they ever hit the market,
No.
the mailing
They
list?
hit the market. They hit the market. So mostly gastronomy, restaurants as well. So some of them are also in US. For example, this year in US, it's going to be a wine which is called Suma Tree. And
SUMMA, like the...
SOUMA, yes.
Okay.
And Su refers to Sauvignon Gris, which is a resistant grape variety we experimented with, because I think also here we need to understand where to grow those new hybrids in a certain way, which are having many advantages because you don't need to spray them, but we still need to understand how they react on certain vinification methods, certain terroirs. So this is all the idea of what we have here. Ma refers to mash, so it wasn't skin and stem for 1.5 years, and tree refers to vintage blends of 3 different vintages because we wanted to give it also a lot of time, so it's 18, 19, 20, for example. So these are experiments where we want to understand certain things, and we want to understand how to adapt to a changing environment.
Do you do that with the best intentions and then you taste the wine and you go, oh my God, this sucks. We have to hide this. I mean,
sometimes
that's part of discovery and experiment.
Absolutely. So many comments, they're passing by our planet and you don't even see them. So many experiments are so shitty that you never going to see them.
That's the natural, cycle.
Absolutely,
and all that.
So
you can't get ahead without falling behind sometimes.
Correct. So the purpose of the comments is not, as we have in the masterpieces, where we want to really optimize every little detail. These are wines where we just want to go.
You've given yourself that.
Sometimes we just forget them about 3 years in the cellar, and then we rediscover them in a certain way, hidden in the last angle.
All right. Last thing I'm asking everyone and this is strictly from your perspective, what makes the wines from the Alto Adige so special?
Well, I think we have a special. I think our uniqueness is our diversity. So dealing with.
We're not talking just Legator. We're talking the region, right?
So I think talking about geology, talking about altitude, this vertical diversity as well. So having vineyards on 500 feet, having vineyards on 4,000 feet. But I think in general, it's this alpine touch what our wines have. So
what does
verticality,
the touch do? What?
Freshness, tension.
Acidity.
This is acidity as well. But Yeah, ripeness in a certain way, also structure, but also vertical structure.
Right.
I think Alto Adige wines are wines where you want to have a second sip.
Yes. I think what frustrates me is the wines across the board are so good. Pick the ones that you like. It's just not enough people, have access to them or know about them and when they get them. Because most of the wine critics love the wines.
Yeah.
It's not like, so. All right. We got to go.
So for example, one good possibility to get our wines is also VinConnect. So it's a partner that we collaborated with.
Is
also
that an
for-
online thing or?
That's an online thing. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's VINCONNECT.
Correct.
All right. I want to thank my guest, Clemens Alois Legator from the Family Vineyard. Alois Legator, thank you for spending time with us and enlightening us. You are listening to the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. We are in the Alto Adige region in northern Italy, also known as Südtirol. We'll be touring the entire region and speaking with different wineries. Our guest is Werner Walboth. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Werner Walboth does just about everything at Abbazia di Novicello, including sales. Werner, welcome to the Grape Nation podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We just did a tasting here earlier, and this is a very unique place, and I want you to tell me two things. First of all, we are in the Alto Adige. Where are we in the Alto Adige? Where is Abbazia di Novicello?
So we are in the northeast of Alto Adige and the far north, actually. If you are looking 2 miles more or less north, wine growing is not possible anymore. So we are right at the edge where wine growing finished.
So it's among the northernmost wine regions.
Right.
All right. So, we've been touring around to a lot of wineries, tastings, meeting people. This is a unique setup in a unique situation. I mean, this isn't, a cantina and it's not a big winery or a small winery. It is Abbazia di Novicello. So tell me a little history, the background of this, and bring me to the current, why there's a winery still here and, what's going on here. We just walked through the church. So give me a little history. Keep it in the wine context.
Well, Abbazia di Novacella was founded in 1142, so 881 years ago now. And since the beginning, we were active in the wine business because the abbey is surrounded by vineyards, and actually the beginnings of wine growing in Alto Adige go back to Valle Jarco, right to this area, because the oldest findings which were connected to the production of wine were right here 3 miles south from Novacella, and therefore still today we know that here wine always has been grown, and as today the winery is surrounded by vineyards, we know since ever here was wine, and that makes us be one of the oldest wineries in Italy.
How about the world? It's got to be up there too, right?
Probably one of the oldest of the world, always with a continuous wine growing history, of course.
So you said the winery was part of the monastery or the abbey to provide wine. Was it more for religious reasons, or was it for economic reasons, to bring in revenue or to employ farmers?
It was a mix between. So it was, of course, during the Holy Masses, they needed some wine, and therefore they had wine for the Holy Masses. But of course, also the monks themselves consumed some wine. Then it was for the employees. We always had a lot of employee, and we found some documents that every single employee, it was in the 18th century, had the right to more or less 4 liters of wine, which is more than a gallon of wine a day for each employee. And then it was quite
Wait, did you say a gallon a day?
a day, a day.
A day.
Say 4 liters a day,
A day.
more than a gallon a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we had a lot of tourists here as well. So the monastery itself is in a very strategic place. It was founded in this place because they wanted that people who comes from Central Europe and which was going towards Rome, and Rome then always has been a political, religious, and cultural center, had to pass by here, and a lot of them stopped by here, and so a lot of the wine which was produced was consumed, or all the wine which was produced was consumed directly here in the monastery, and it was a good business for the monastery as well.
Makes sense. Let's talk about that. As far as the fact that we're in a monastery and a whole complex, it is a winery. Is it fair to say you focus primarily on white wines? Focus, not exclusive.
We are focusing primarily on white wine because we are here in the area. As I said, we are in far northwest.
Altitude, best for whites.
Right, yeah. And therefore, here in Valle d'Isarco, we have 98% white wines. And therefore, in the surroundings of the abbey, there's just white wines.
Right. So tell me, that's a good segue. Tell me about surroundings. So this is a winery. Obviously, you're making wines from grapes, from farmers around the area. How does that work? They're close in proximity to the abbey, and it'll spread out. Are they partners? Does the church own the property? Is it contractual with farmers? How does the source get to the winery, which is the grapes?
Well, we do actually own some vineyards.
You do?
So, yeah, the winery itself, or the monastery itself, does own more or less 55 acres of vineyards.
Significant.
Yeah, that's what we do own. But actually, most of these vineyards are further south in Bolzano and Appiano area, and there we do produce red wines.
Right.
Because the monks already 400 years ago understood that Valle d'Isarco is not suited for red wines, and therefore they bought some vineyards further south.
All the way back then?
All the way
because they
back
wanted
then.
red wines.
Because then they said that the red wine from Valle d'Isarco is not good for healthiness because it's too acid, and therefore they bought vineyards further south. And so today, here in Valle d'Isarco, in the surroundings of the abbey, we do own only 15 acres more or less. But as I said first, white wine is more important for us than red, and therefore all the rest of the white wine we are making with grapes. We are buying from farmers from the surroundings. So there are some 60 farmers here in the surroundings, which 60 years ago, so 60 and 60, decided to found a cooperative. Cooperatives are quite common in Alto Adige.
Yes.
And also the farmers here in surroundings decided to found a cooperative. But in difference to the others, they decided not to build up a winery, but to sell the grapes to an existing winery. And so in 1962, there started a collaboration between the 60 farmers, which are in a cooperative, and Abbazia di Novacella. And still today, we are buying the grapes from these farmers, from this cooperative.
So are they producing grapes exclusively for you?
Exclusively, yeah.
So basically, you're their client.
Yeah, the contract with them says they have to sell all the grapes to Abbazia Novacella, and on the other side, we have to take all the grapes from them. So we are not allowed to say, no, we don't want to, this year we don't want.
You've committed to them.
Yeah.
And the proximity of those farmers are in this area, a peripheral around the winery?
Like 6 or 7 miles.
Right,
So
just, relatively close and all of that. Tell me about this particular area, which a good chunk of the grapes come from. We've designated that they're whites, and we've said that, you have vineyards here, you deal with, partners within 6 miles. So what are we talking about elevation-wise? Are we talking multiple exposures? Do the climates vary because of the exposures? Is there a difference in soils? How much diversity in all of that are we dealing with?
A lot of diversity, and First of all, because of the altitude. So we are starting here with the lowest vineyards at elevations of something about 2,000 feet.
Wow.
And going up to 3,000 feet more or less. And above that, viticulture is not possible anymore. So because it's getting too cool, and this altitude has a high impact on the acidity in wines and the sugar level, of course, as well, but also on the grape varieties. And therefore, we are, depending on the altitudes, we are selecting the grape varieties we are cultivating. And in general, here in Val d'Isarco, we have completely different grape varieties from the rest of Alto Adige. So in Alto Adige, we have...
So let's talk about that, and let's get to the obvious one specifically. It's an important part of your identity, important part of your sales, and that is the grape Kerner, Kerner.
Right.
So that varietal, that grape, does well in this environment. The altitude and the soils and all of that.
Yeah, Kerner is...
Because we were talking, off air, you don't see it everywhere because you can't grow it everywhere. This is ideal, right?
Right. Kerner is son of Riesling, so it's a cross between Riesling and Schiava or Trellinger, and is a grape variety which is, when it was created, it was thought for areas like this, cool climate areas, and that's what Kerner needs. He needs cool climate, and therefore in other areas in Alto Adige it would be too warm for growing Kerner, but that's right the best area for this grape variety. You have cool climate, you have fresh winds, so we have our winds coming from south or cool winds coming from north, and that's a thing.
Perfect for the grape.
Kerner needs that, yeah.
Do you know the way some people discuss Pinot Noir as a finicky, thin-skinned grape to grow? You ever hear that? Is Kerner an easy grape to grow?
Very difficult.
It is difficult.
Yeah, because
explain why. What are the difficulties?
It's very vigorous, so it's growing a lot. It's growing very fast, and therefore it's a lot of work in the vineyards. And that's the problem why, for example, in Germany, Kerner never had a big success. It brings normally very high yields, but in order to have a good quality wine and some structure in wine, you have to reduce the yields by a lot as well. And therefore, Kerner is a lot of work because you have to do a lot of leaf work because there are a lot of leaves. You have to take away a lot of leaves. And
it's labor intensive.
Yeah, it's labor intensive. And then, you have to be very careful to not have too high yields because then you have any structure in wine. But if you have too low yields, you have too much sugar and too much alcohol. And so it's very complicated. But
did you say it was fast growing, or
it's fast growing?
Do you harvest it earlier, or
no?
Everything happens quickly.
No, it's not fast. It's growing a lot. It was maybe,
right.
Yeah, it's growing a lot. So the plant is growing a lot, not in terms of time fast, but very, very.
Right.
Yeah.
You mean the
plant?
The plant. Yeah. I get that now. How important is it to the winery? I mean, it represents a significant portion of your wine sales of specific varietal, right?
Yeah, it's has become almost 25% of the production. So every fourth bottle we are making is Kerner, and that's quite important because if you're thinking back, we started the first bottle of Kerner was sold in 1992. So it's
that was it.
Yeah, it's a 30-year history. And
has demand outstripped production? I mean, are people buying more than you're growing, or I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah, of course. It was.
Did you plant more Kerner through the years?
We did plant a lot. So when Kerner first came to our area, it was in the 1960s. It was the farmers forcing to plant it because it has a high frost resistancy. And so the risk for the farmer was lower because back then in the 1980s, we had a lot of years with very strong winter frost. And for example, 1981 was a year where almost 75% of the wines in the whole area died.
Really?
Yeah, but Kerner did it. Kerner did survive, and therefore it was the farmer focusing on that or they were aimed to plant Kerner. But then, starting from maybe 2000 or late 90s, the market, or we as a winery, saw that the market reacts in a very positive way to this grape variety, and there was a big request. And so we were forcing the farmers to plant Kerner, and so it was a very fast story of success.
Yeah, and you almost unique to Bazzi di Novicella. I mean, because it plays such an important role.
Yeah.
I have a funny story. I was in New York. It had to be 15 years ago, which is a while back. And I was downtown in Soho, Tribeca, which is a hip neighborhood. And my wife and I were walking around, and there was a cool-looking wine store. So I said to her, let me just go in there, and I want to look around. And a woman owned it, and she was really cool. What are you looking for? Can I help you? I said, I just want to see what you have. And then after walking around for 5-10 minutes, I said, listen, the selection's amazing. Suggest something for me to take home, something fun. And she gave me the Kerner, the Abbazia di Novicella Kerner. And I'm talking 15 years ago. I mean, she said, well, this is an interesting winery and it's an unusual grape. I mean, she nailed it. You would hope somebody today would do that. And here's somebody, that was way ahead of the curve. So I drank it and I'm like, it was relatively inexpensive or good value. Let me put it that way. So since then I've been drinking it, in the summer, I'll buy 8 bottles and put it out. It's a great wine that way. I hope more people discover it. That's why we're talking about it. You mentioned before, and tell me again, the whites are an important part of the winery and thrive well in the higher elevations. But the winery many, many years ago committed to lower altitudes, like in Bolzano, to grow reds.
Right.
But not recently. I mean, walk me through that again.
No, it was actually starting from 1623.
Oh, that far back.
1623, the abbot at that time, because it's still being a monastery and it was then, decided to buy vineyards in Bolzano. And it was right in the center of Bolzano. It's called Mariaheim, this area, which today it's still being part of or we still have a vineyard there, but it's more or less 2.5 or 5 acres more or less today.
Is it surrounded by just urban growth and everything?
After World War I, Bolzano was growing a lot, and our vineyards, which were back then some 15 acres, became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so in 1938,
why did they become smaller? You sold them off?
We sold them, because the city itself.
There was did you sell them and made good money, or you were forced to sell?
Dan vineyard, the
was
price
so cheap.
It was so cheap. It was, and you have to imagine it was all very political. So there was some kind of Italianization here, and Mussolini wanted to have a big Bolzano city, and so he created the city, and where the vineyards were, they put houses.
So he had no patience for the vineyard.
He had no patience for those vineyards.
So Bolzano is sort of a dream or a goal. It was a goal of Mussolini. He wanted to build this little cosmopolitan center.
Of course, because it was a German-speaking area in Italy, and he wanted to Italianize it, and so he built the houses for Italians, which are coming from the south.
That's the storyline.
Story.
I should have known that, but it's so evident now. All right, so let's talk about farming practices, cellar practices. What you guys are doing. Talk to me about in the farms. You deal with 60 partner wineries and your vineyards here. I mean, how do you farm? I mean, do you farm thoughtfully? Do you farm organic, near organic? Do you do a lot of treatments? I mean, how would you describe those practices?
Of course, we are not organic. It would be quite difficult with 60 farmers. So that makes it even
Right.
more difficult, because then you can say, okay, now I want to be organic, and the next year or after 3 years you are organic. If we are starting the process, we have to do it with 60 farmers, and we have to convince.
So that being
60
said, because that's legitimate,
Yeah.
you know, it's a hard thing to control because you sort of have to be certified on each one.
Yeah.
What are they doing? I mean, is it good practices per se?
Yeah, we have a
Do you create guidelines for your farmers
we are
and your own
creating.
farms?
We have a guideline, so a guideline where we are giving the rules how they have to work. Of course, we are looking to do it as sustainable as possible, and we are working towards a sustainable certification as well within the next 3, hopefully not even years. And yeah, we always, as Winewood says, we are here for a very long time. So it's 880 years.
And these are
therefore
family
we are-
vineyards too. I mean,
yeah,
these,
and therefore we are saying sustainability is part
but
of our
these
DNA.
these farmers, their kids are running through the vineyards. You know, you don't want to spray them with herbicides and
Of course, and I think that the young generation is
even
way
more.
open
The,
to
the
this.
promise is even more with that generation, right?
Yeah.
So you practice sustainable cultivation, CO2 neutral, or those things
We
that
are, we are actually, as a winery, or as monastery, we are CO neutral since 1992, and that's dates back to a time when nobody was talking about CO
is
neutral.
that like the first or only
That's
monastery to be
One
CO2
of the
neutral?
first,
yeah.
first wineries working towards that, and that's that proves that that's not a thing we are not thinking it, but sustainability for us always has been very, very important, and it still have or still is.
And you can get certified in sustainability one way or another. You implied
Yes, we are.
you're striving towards that.
Yeah, we are. As I said first, so within the next couple of years, we are going towards a certification.
So very few people argue that wine is really made in the vineyard. You know, if you practice the right practices, you know, you're not screwing around out there. You're going to have beautiful grapes, and beautiful grapes make beautiful wines. But you do have to pull them off the vines and bring them into the cellar. What's going on in the cellar? I mean, is it basically not heavy intervention? I mean, how would you describe?
Of course, it's easier for a very, very tiny winery to let just the nature work. We are, let's say,
You mean like indigenous yeast or things like
we
that?
are kind of mid-sized winery making 80,000 cases a year, and therefore we have we think we need to give some kind of quality guarantee to our consumers as well, and therefore we are doing tests or experiment with natural yeasts, but normally we are working with just industrial yeast just
Right.
to have this to sleep better. Let's call it like this.
Right. Yeah, to know that your product, you know, I don't know if you can get to that at some point, or like you said, the scale is too big.
We are.
I don't-
We actually last year we started to say, hey, let's try it with a few casks to not put any.
So you're always experimenting.
We are
or-
always experimenting, and we are looking what could be the best for wines at the end. That's also an important thing. We want to have a guarantee on the product, and we want to have a good wine, and we are doing the less possible to get as a result the high quality product.
Right. There shouldn't be much you have to do, because if it's coming out of the field in good shape, and you know you're just making wine, you're not playing with it. I didn't get a chance to see the winery part, But if I went into like the fermenting room, are we looking at stainless steel, concrete, wood? I mean, what are you primarily doing? Whites tend to be what? Stainless?
Whites, depending on the grape variety, aromatic grape varieties such as Kerner, 100% stainless steel, because we want to work on the fruit, on the freshness, on the minerality, and therefore just stainless steel. Less aromatic grape varieties such as Grüner Veltliner or Pinot Grigio as well, or Sylvaner. Some wood, some oak or acacia, but never more than 30%. So 70% stainless steel, 30% big oak. Maybe in the selection line a little bit of barrique, so small oak. Reds, fermentation, stainless steel mostly. We're starting, so we bought this year, so they're pretty new. We can look at them later if you want to. We bought some concrete tanks to do the fermentation of the selection reds in concrete as well. Then aging of the reds in completely in wood. All of the reds.
The reds
aging in
that
wood.
we talked about in Bolzano are trucked over
We
here
are,
after they're picked?
yeah,
Or
actually
you don't
not
have
only-
the facility there, do you?
We have not all of them in Bolzano, but in 1938, the monastery bought some vineyards in Appiano. So today we have a 40 acres more or less of vineyards in Appiano, and there we have a second winery. So the red wines, which are Schiava, Pinot Noir, and Lagrein, do actually ferment in a second winery down there, and only the aging then takes place here in this winery here in Bressanone, in the north of Alto Adige.
That makes sense. So all the barriques and aging and stuff are in this facility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have just one winemaker, and of course we
Right.
want the winemaker wants to have everything under control, and so it's easier for him to handle just one winery.
Right. All right, let's talk about the wines. You know, we tasted a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is there 3 lines of wines? There's a classic, pronounce it for me, Prepositus.
Yeah, Prepositus.
And is there an Insolitus? Or
Insolitus.
is that still?
It's still so we
So
have to.
you know what? Let's start from the bottom and
Yeah.
tell me, describe. I would guess classic is the most varietals and the expression. Tell me what the classic is.
Yeah, classic is for us the wines where we have, or we are in the line where we're making the fresh and fruity style of wine.
Drink now.
Drink now
Or
or
you
within the
can
next
hold it
5
for-
years.
right.
I think every wine which we do produce has an aging potential of at least 5 years. So even the classic line, we have freshness in our wines. We have acidity. They are aging. Not for the classic, maybe not for 10 or 15 years, but at least
But
for
they
5
have
years.
the body and the bones to
they
sit
have
there 3, 4, 5 years and show
everything.
nice bottle age, right?
Right. Yeah. They have everything you need. Actually, we were tasting some wines from the 1970s, so 50 years old, and then we did make only the classic wine, and they were still being in a very, very good shape. And that proves that every wine coming from this area can age. Even
So on the
classics.
classic line, there's about a dozen varietals, or
We are, yes, more or less. So it's
somewhere around there.
8 white wines. We're making Müller, Thurgau, Sylvaner, Kerner, Riesling, Grüner Veltliner, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, and Gewürztraminer. So 8 varietals, and then 3 varieties for the reds, which is Schiava, Lagrein, and Pinot Noir. That's the classic. Then the Prepositus, that's the selection. So means grapes coming from the best spots, so only the best spots, best exposures, then older wines, lower yields, and then also different treatment in the winery itself. So normally always longer aging on the fine lees, so they are released only after 1 year, some of them after 2 years, some of them after 3 years, some of them to wood aging. So that's the high quality line. And prepositus means abbot, so that's the Latin word for abbot.
Oh.
And the wines are dedicated to the abbots of the monastery, the 58 abbots from the founding.
Are there less SKUs in the proprietus? How do you pronounce it?
Prepositus.
Propositus.
Yes.
I'm sorry. There are less
There are just-
varietals than
Yeah, just eight. So
Eight,
six,
okay.
6 whites and
right.
2
Those are
reds.
the
So
ones that you
it's
want to
kind of-
concentrate
yeah,
on.
it's kind of the pyramid of
And
our
I guess-
quality. And then we have the insolitos,
which
but
is a fun thing.
it's more or less a fun thing. Yeah.
We tasted some sparkling. That's not in solitus.
That's insolitos as well. So
because
here-
you're experimenting with varietals with sparkling.
Right. We are Insolitos was a line we introduced only in 2020, and it was a little bit the idea to show wines which we are producing while we are focusing on the big issues of the future, which is climate change, which is
Orange wine.
orange wine, new wine styles,
The
low.
market wants orange wine, so let's
Yeah.
experiment and try to make it. Is that the thinking?
Yeah, or the thinking is with the orange wine was, can we make an orange wine which is recognizable as made from Abbazia Novacella? So not just an orange wine, that would be easy. But if I'm drinking it and comparing it to another wine, orange wine, can I find out which is our style? And that was a little bit the idea we had behind. Then we worked with resistant grape varieties. So because pest management in the future will be a big issue, and therefore we made a wine where we did no treatments in the vineyards.
So you're experimenting also for climate change.
We are, yeah.
What varietals, at what altitudes, all that
Right.
stuff.
We did
So that's an important experiment for you guys.
Pinot Blanc from high altitude, because Pinot Blanc here, even if it's very common in Alto Adige, it's not common here in the surroundings of the Abbey because it's too cool for Pinot Blanc. And therefore, we tried to plant it right here. And we wanted not just to plant it, but to show our consumers or people how the result would be, and so it's partly a fun game. The
Right.
sparkling wine was a fun game. We had fun to produce the sparkling wine and decided to do it with Silvaner because that's very typical for the area, but also a thing where we are trying to find out what the future could bring.
Now, some of those wines hit the market. They're available.
We are.
Or
No, actually.
so it's
Almost
really more of an in-house.
It's we are making in between 1,000 and 2,000 bottles.
Okay.
And we are not repeating the experiments. So we are making the wine, and the next year
On to
another
the next
experiment.
thing.
And so there are a couple of bottles on the market, but quite difficult.
Very limited, yeah. In good times, do you sell most of the wine that you make? Like, let's not talk about COVID because that had an effect on anyone. But do you have trouble selling the wines that you make?
No, we
You sell a high percentage of what you bottle.
we sell all of what we bottle. So we have our problem like this year was right the opposite. So there were 2 months without wine.
Really? And a high percentage of that stays in Italy and even stays in this area, right? For tourism and the residents. How do your sales, but maybe you're a little different because you're more prominent in the States. Tell me how that works out.
Yeah, we are actually prominent in the States, but also in Italy, it's a little bit different to other wineries. Historically, Alto Adige in the 1980s, 70s, they produce mostly red wines for the German, Swiss, and Austrian market. But we here in Novacella, we never had any reds because it's too cool for reds, and therefore we always produced white wines, and we weren't able to sell them on those markets, and therefore already then we had a focus on the Italian market. And when Alto Adige then started its quality, or is started to focus more on the quality and more on the Italian market, we already were there. And therefore still today, rest of Italy is way more important for us than the local market. So it's in terms of numbers, it's 10% local market, then it's 15% direct sales, which is mostly tourism, so in between Italians and Germans, and then it's 25.
The direct to consumer, the tourism, it seems like you're doing as much or more than anyone on that.
Yeah. It's
You know.
50, I think.
I mean,
more.
does anyone do mailing lists around here? Where you send wine to people, or
We are, but it's not
It's
very
not a big
important.
part
It's
of-
not a big part.
Right.
We have our
because in the
online shop.
States, wine clubs
Yeah.
and DTC mailing lists, you get a listing once or twice a year. I mean, respond to this. I mean, the wines are incredible. These are some of the best expressions of white wines anywhere. The quality,
Thank you.
the diversity of, like you could taste the classic line where it's fruit forward and fresh, or you can go to the next line, where it's made a little differently. Back in the U.S., just a lot of people I know don't know about these wines. Some restaurants have them, some retailers. I told you the story 15 years ago. A woman told me about, Kerner. Do you think there's an image problem? I mean, are you comfortable? I mean, you always want more people to know about it and sell more, but are you there, or what can you do to make that happen?
Of course, it could be more, but on the other hand, we are quite a small winery, and as I told you first, the quantity is the quantity we have,
Right.
and
Can't
today,
sell more. So
today we are selling some 10,000 cases on the U.S. market. So
which is a lot for
it's just a
the
lot
Alto
for
Adige.
winery in Alto Adige.
Yeah.
I think we are.
So
one of the
you're more of the model. You're the example. Where you've gotten into the market, and because production is limited, you can only go so far. But do you feel, in general, I mean, it's one thing if the wines are okay. The wines are great. Anyone who's going to taste these wines, they're going to, why didn't I know about these? I've been drinking this crappy Pinot Grigio or Pinot Bianco forever. These are great. I guess that's why we're here too, to help you with that. Do you get into outside markets, to promote wines and sell?
Of course, we are for the U.S. market a strong focus. So as a winery, we have a person actually based in New York, which is doing this work for us because it's so important for us. This market, we are
To have
direct.
someone on the ground.
Yeah,
there.
we have
Good
somebody
for
on
you.
the ground, and therefore also during the last couple of years, which for other wineries were quite difficult on the U.S. market, for us it was good. So we had 2021, which is run awesome, 2022 even better. So we are, at the moment, the limits on the market are kind of the quantity we can allocate to the market.
See, when I talk to people, they think of Italian wines. They don't think of white. You're always going to be overshadowed by Tuscany, Chianti, Barolo, Barbaresco. Sicily is very hot now. Besides not knowing enough about the region, they don't even know that, a lot of whites are made here. Italy is a destination for white wines. That's what I hope, gets out there. But I think it will. The product speaks for itself. So that organically will, get out there. We have to wrap up. But I want to ask you a question that I'm asking everybody, and I want you to answer it in your words, how you think about it. And the question is, what makes the wines of the Alto Adige so special?
One of the most important things is that Alto Adige is in general a guarantee for quality. So you can pick a bottle blind, and
That's what I've been saying for the last 5 minutes. People don't know that, though.
Doesn't matter which producer, you're grabbing a good bottle of wine, and that's a guarantee. And I think that's one part of the story of success of Alto Adige. And then, of course, fresh wines are very trendy, and we have the freshness in our wines, we have the fruit in our wines, and we have a wine style, I think, in general, which is very modern, and that's also part of the success. And the story in general of Alto Adige as a white wine area is very young. So we started to focus on white wines only 40 years ago. So it's yesterday.
Right.
And therefore we are still pushing a lot, still working a lot. Everybody does, and nobody is thinking, okay, we are fine now, and we don't still have to work on it. And
Well, you said the wines are fresh. What makes a wine a good food wine?
the combination of everything, but
What's the word I'm looking
freshness
for? Freshness and acidity.
and acidity.
There's
yeah.
great acidity in these wines, right?
Yeah.
So when you say what makes them so special, I mean, you answered it and you didn't realize in 5-7 different ways, which is a lot for a wine. Well, thank you for that. We're going to wrap up. I want to thank our guest, Werner Wohlwolf. He is here at Abbazia di Novicello, and we are where in the Val di Zarco?
Val di Zarco.
Val di Zarco, which is the northeastern part of the Alto Adige. So thanks for joining us on the Grape Nation.
Thank you.
And we are on the Heritage Radio Network.
Thanks. Bye.
Today's program was brought to you by Alto Adige Wines, wines from the Italian Alps. In the northeast corner of Italy, Alto Adige is one of the country's smallest wine-producing regions, yet one of its most multifaceted. Shaped by the Alps and Dolomites to the north, and Mediterranean influences from the south, Alto Adige produces an extraordinary range of top-quality wines from more than 20 different grape varieties, and wine growers tend vineyards at elevations ranging from 600 to 3,300 feet above sea level. Considered Italy's leading white wine region, look for Pinot Bianco, Sauvignon, Gewürztraminer, and Pinot Grigio. Don't miss out on indigenous reds like Schiava, also called Grenache, and Lagrein, as well as Pinot Noir. For more information, visit www.altoadigewines.com. Campaign financed by EU Regulation 1308/2013.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. We are in the Alto Adige region in northern Italy, also known as Südtirol. We'll be touring the entire region and speaking with different wineries. Our guest, excuse me, is Judith Unterholzner. Did I get the name right?
Yes,
Okay.
you got it.
I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. So I'm here with Judith Unterholzer. She is a partner at Gumphoff Winery and basically has her hands in everything. And we'll get into that a little. So Judith, welcome to the Grape Nation.
Welcome and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for the invitation too, because previous to this interview, we did a fairly extensive tasting and I think we were all wowed by the wines. I think you could tell that.
Thanks for the
All right,
laurels.
so first of all, where are we in the Alto Adige? Where is Gumphoff? You know, we know the Alto Adige is in the northeastern border part of Italy, but within, where are we?
Actually, Gumphoff is geographically speaking located in the area of Valle Isarco, which is Alto Adige and Italy's northernmost wine growing area. And it's a very narrow, relatively long, to be Germanly precise, 35-kilometer long valley heading from Bolzano to the Austrian border, to the Brennero. And so it is, if you consider the wine region, Alto Adige, which has the shape of a flex capacity, on the left-hand branch. And actually we are about 10 minutes driving away from the provincial capital, from Bolzano.
Right.
Hence, we have a Mediterranean influence, but as we are just on the foot of the Dolomites, the famous UNESCO mountain chain, we get very fresh alpine winds in the night.
Has the influence on the wines, which we'll talk about. Gumphoff has interesting history. And, I might say that if you look at the sign on the winery, it says Marcus Prockweiser, Gumphoff. So we'll talk about why that. But give me a little history and tie all that in for me. Things have been going on around here for a little while.
Yeah, actually, our winery has been existing as a such, respectively, as a farm, which is also cultivating grapevines and vinifying the fruit directly in the family cellar, has been existing at least since the 16th century. Wow. The oldest written document we have, which mentions active grape growing and winemaking over here, is still today in the archive of a beautiful historical castle about 10 minutes driving towards the mountains. And up there, where back in the days our landlords, the Counts of Fier, were living already in 15...
The Counts of Fier?
The Counts of Fier. Fier is
Spell it for me.
F-I-E.
F-I-E.
It's the name of the village where we are located. And that noble family already in 1546 got wine deliveries from Gumphoff, because actually you need to know the Valle di Zarco, which is nowadays the main transit route, so the classic north-south route for a lot of goods, but even travelers heading towards Rome or more southern territories, or also Italians going to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Our valley, the bottom of the valley, back in the days, in the area where we are, was not viable or walkable. So all the travelers, which were quite often heading to the Eternal City, and not only, they had to cross the mountains. And obviously they were walking or riding a horse. Hence, it was quite challenging and obviously also exhausting to do those trips. And due to that, they had to have sort of rest stations where they could feed the animals, but also recharge their own batteries. And one of those classic, today we would say a hotel, was Brussels Castle, where the landlords were taking care of the travelers. Hence, they had quite a high demand of all the kinds of agricultural goods. And as that family was part of the big Habsburg dynasty, the emperors of Austria-Hungary, here in our territory, exactly the same natural taxation rule was applied, which existed also on the other side of the Alps. So 10% of all the kinds of products we had, from the eggs to the potatoes to the grain, veggies, but also fruit, and obviously also wine, because the guests were thirsty, and not only those, the landlords too. We were delivering all those products, but apparently what Gumphoff supplied, and our neighbors too, was not enough to feed and to give to drink to all the thirsty people. Right. So that family asked for additional deliveries, and hence Gumphoff was bringing some more wine. And one of those supplying lists proves that we've been existing till then. In that period, the family, the Prockwieser's, that's why Marcus Prockwieser is indicated on the label, which is my fiancé's name. His family has been living at Gumphoff since 1802. So we have a little less history than the farm itself, but still a couple of centuries.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and actually his grand-grandfather moved just from the next hill to the area over here, because he was the second son of a family, hence he had not the right to get the heritage and to take over the family's farm. So he was looking for other land to acquire, and that's how Simon Prockwieser in 1802 ended up over here.
And when he got here, did he start planting vines along with other, or the vines were here?
The vines were here already.
They were here. Okay.
They were here. He added some though, because the Prockwieser's and Marcus's dad, like Marcus himself, they are very passionate about wine. And so already the former generations, his Marcus's grandfather as well as his father, they were always making wine. But actually, it was mostly cultivating few rows of grapevines in order to vinify them primarily for friends and family, so for their private consumption. And slowly though, as in those centuries or in those decades, the main road to the Alpe di Siusi, to the Chilier Plateau, was going through our farm. A lot of locals stopped by for a glass, and they started appreciating the easy drinking, lighthearted Schiava. They did. So they were demanding if it wouldn't be possible to acquire also some wine, mostly in smaller barrels or in double liter or bigger volumed containers to bring back home, and also to offer to their guests, because in the late 70s, early 80s, in our area over here, slowly, even tourism started. And the local hosts mostly wanted to offer also local produce, the today so-called zero-mile sourcing, to the first guests coming and discovering the area. But actually for them, viticulture was always one of many income sources. As you need to know that Marcus's grandfather as well as his dad, they both are survivors of one, respectively, both world wars. So they experienced obviously years when times here were extremely difficult, and when it was crucial to not depend too much on outsiders or on the availability of products on the market. Hence, the idea and their main focus ever since was to grow and breed whatever possible at Gumphof in order not to depend on the market or the political situation surrounding us.
That was good foresight.
Absolutely.
So technically, Marcus is to this property, not the family, third generation. Because you said his grandfather moved over.
His great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
So fourth generation.
Okay, fourth. Okay.
Yep.
Then his grandfather, then his dad, then him tended this particular property and all of that. All right, so that gives us a little history. Now I wanna get into your head on this a little. Toured many wineries. I've toured many here.
Yeah.
Toured wineries all over the world. And with many wines and winemakers, typical of the industry, there are not a lot of women in top positions.
Yeah.
There are women in positions, but not a lot of women in top positions. Is that also true in the Alto Adige, where women are not as represented as they should be?
It was for sure in the past, although it has been changing over the last decade or two, I would say. Also because a rather specific law we have in our agricultural context over here.
The selling of the properties? Or?
No, actually, we have the concept of the so-called closed farm.
Which means what?
Which was invented by the Habsburgans, and the idea was to prevent that the local farmers can no longer make a living from agriculture by having two small realities. Hence, over here, if you're handing over, or if you want to hand over a so-called closed farm, you're legally forced to give the whole block to just one child.
They don't want to break up.
You are not allowed to break up.
Generally small hectare. They don't want quarter hectares.
You cannot even break up a 20-hectare closed farm if it is defined as such.
Okay.
And obviously the other sisters and brothers will get money from the lucky one getting everything as a heritage. But nevertheless, that made sure over decades already that agriculture still can be a primary income source for locals, and that the farms are not abandoned because they find better jobs, allowing them to make more money and having more comfortable and more pleasant working hours in other industries.
So that sort of seems to be the culture here.
That's the culture here.
Because you don't see a lot of selling, you see a lot of passing
Absolutely.
to family.
Yeah.
The laws have made it that it's not broken up. And I guess it's fair to say women are coming into the business through generational change.
Yeah, also because in the past, it was normal that even the youngest child was the first male one. All the bigger sisters were skipped. So not the first
I mean, the
one.
mindset then was we're not letting a woman,
Yeah.
run this or be part of it, go, which is to my point. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah.
So now more women are coming in generationally. Obviously, women are more capable than men, probably. So are you confident that in this region that you will see more women?
I think so. Although in general, in Italy, not only in Alto Adige, we still are more old-fashioned than in other wine regions.
Italy culturally is maybe a little chauvinistic or in that sense. So here's an uncomfortable question, and it doesn't involve you because you're your own winery. But to your knowledge, is there a woman cooperative president or chairman?
Not in the wine world in Alto Adige.
Right. I am sure one day.
Hopefully.
But it should be by now. So
it actually, till about a decade ago, there was even the mandatory rule. So it was politics who had to make it an essential requirement that there has to be a female CEO a female member in the board of directors, which didn't exist, but that was already a little revolution.
Right.
But
that was a big deal.
It's getting better, and we see it.
It's such a nothing thing now, but it's still a big deal, and it was a big deal. But hopefully things will soften. Let's say a friend of yours' daughter is in her early mid-20s and said, and they're not part of a co-op or not even a vineyard owner, and says to you, "I'm so intrigued by the wine industry. I would love to get into it." What do you tell someone like that? Leave the Alto Adige, don't do it, you're a woman, or follow your dreams, obviously?
Actually, I would answer follow your dreams also because especially amongst the small independent growers, so we so-called vignaioli indipendenti, respectively in German, the freie Weinbauern, there are in percentage way more women than in the co-ops, respectively in the big tenutas. Because obviously there happens farms with just daughters, which should not have a negative connotation, but with just female, with a female generation to come, or even ladies starting with a small vineyard that do everything on their own, that went to Geisenheim or to San Michele to study enology and viticulture. So women who are prepared, who are willing, and especially who have the passion to do. So it's absolutely not impossible that women can make it, even in Alto Adige, and we also have already the first examples.
Right. Well, you're one of them, which is a nice thing. I encourage that, any person, any woman that wants to get into it, certainly there are opportunities here and in the business as you would approach, anything. You do it, with a level of passion and interest. We walked the vineyards earlier. So tell me about slopes, soils, climate, farming practices. I mean, you took me down the vineyards. It was a pretty steep walk down. I thought I was going to go tumbling. I'll set you up, but the tasting room, your home, the cellars are all in one area, and the important vineyards to you surround the property, and the others are very close.
Yeah.
So tell me about this area. It's very steep, right?
It is actually, Marcus is known for being the master of the terraces in Valle Zarco because we have those very inclined, sun-drenched sides.
So the sloping, like you see in the Rhone and other, Hermitage and all, Marcus likes that because of the way it sets up and the sun exposure?
Yeah. We have very steep and relatively high terraces. Just to give you some numbers, the average incline of our vineyards goes from 55 to 70%.
Wow.
To give your followers an idea of what that means, probably most of the Americans have already seen the famous steep section of Lombard Street in San Francisco.
Yes.
The maximum steepness there is 37.5%.
And you're telling me here it's what?
Between 55 and 70. So you need to be quite exercised to work day by day in the vineyards, but at least you no longer need to go to gym.
Right.
If you do your working hours.
You'll get your legs. So a lot of these vineyards, what we say, are west facing?
West, southwestwards facing.
What's the benefit of that exposure?
The biggest benefit is the fact that the area here gets the hottest period of the day just before the sun sets behind the mountains towards west. So the afternoon sun really gives a lot of intense flavors to the fruit and obviously also helps to accumulate sugars in the weeks just before harvest. But we have a ripening process that goes relatively slowly due to the fact that as soon as the sun goes down, we immediately get falling winds from the high Dolomite peaks in our back. Because you need to know that we are birdline just a few kilometers away from those mountains, which have altitudes of even more than 3,000 meters. So up there, first and foremost, the environment is snow-covered for many months a year. And moreover, you always have cool air masses. And due to the density difference, once the sun is away, we have those winds falling all the way down to the steep Izarco Valley. So you have a very ventilated area with these huge diurnal shifts. So for example, last year, and the vintage 2022 in Alto Adige was a quite warm one. Whilst harvesting, we had during the day, sort of as a standard, more than 25 degrees Celsius, even at the end of September.
Wow.
But once the sun set, temperatures drop all the way down to 10 degrees or even less.
It's crazy because I kind of stumbled on or learned that this area is one of the hottest areas in Italy, right? In the summer, it's that Mediterranean. But for your sake, the way it's set up, it cools down at night, which is terrific. What about soils? I mean, your vineyards are fairly compact. You know, they're not spread out, contiguous. I know you have other stuff. Do the soils vary within the properties that we see, or it's...
They vary a little depending on the steepness, obviously, of the plot, as well as on the wave on which you are. So looking out of the window, obviously, who's listening to us just has to imagine. But
well, maybe I'll post some pictures.
It's not a perfectly steep... how can I say, a perfectly steep hill. It has some waves, it has some little hills inside, it has bigger terraces. And actually, this specific profile was created by nature. The ground soil of ours, and that's also the rock in front of which we're sitting in our tasting room, is a volcanic origin. It's the so-called Bolzano quartz porphyry, which can be found actually underneath most of Alto Adige's vineyards. Not just here, but even the ones of our colleagues in the region. And actually, this soil type was formed about 280 million years ago when the African tectonic plate directly crashed in the Euro-Asian one. And we are somehow on the borderline. So in that period, not only the Alps were folded, but also a lot of volcanic activity, hence eruptions, took place over here. And it took obviously millions of years until that lava solidified, but it gives us this highly silicate containing, very mineral rich fundament, which depending on where you are in Alto Adige, can be covered by other material or not. In our case, we have here directly at the farm, mostly this volcanic stone in the ground, just underneath the grass, whilst 2 minutes driving in our Pinot Noir plot, for example, which is a bit more southward facing, there the glaciers during the Ice Age left morenic debris. Highly calcareous containing limestone, the so-called dolomite rock,
Which
after
is
which
great
also
for Pinot Noir,
the mountains
the
are named.
calcareous, right?
Yeah. And that's why Marcus, once he acquired that former grassland and did a soil analysis, respectively a soil profile, and saw how the structure and the layers are, he decided to give it a trial with Pinot Noir.
And too early to say. I mean, we tasted some Pinots. They tasted pretty good.
Thank you. It took us a little to understand how to manage Pinot. Not in the sense that we think Pinot is the diva, as it is considered to be, because we have to say, with that vineyard there, we do not need to invest more time and effort for the Pinot Noir than for the other varieties we have, because where it is cultivated, it feels well and it is performing.
Right.
But we had to understand what the perfect moment for the picking of the fruit is. With the whites, we tend to be relatively late when harvesting because we want to have fully ripe, although not overripe flavors. With a Pinot instead, once we started, and it's a planting from 2003, so the first experimental vintage was 05. At the beginning, we started probably a bit too late with the picking. Hence, the first vintages were slightly jammy and characterized by dried fruit. But once we tasted those wines with a certain age and a certain bottle evolution done, we understood, no, Pinot Noir has to be amongst the first varieties which we're picking. And for sure, the very first one we finish harvest. And this quicker time frame when harvesting now gives us this very crunchy but spicy Pinot style, where the fact that we use quite a lot of whole cluster gives you this grip on the palate and the texture.
That's the winemaking options or parts that you choose. You know, walking in and out of co-ops and wineries, I mean, I've been to places with as many as a dozen plus varietals, sometimes even more. I knew this, and it was made more clear when we did the tasting, that you really focus on a handful, you know, maybe 5, 6. I mean, we'll talk about them for a second, but we just talked about Pinot Noir. We tasted some beautiful Pinot Biancos, the Sauvignons, the Schiava, which, you know, is important. Why focus on those varieties? Those are the best matches for the soil and the conditions.
Actually, those really are the varieties where, according to us and our palates, the terroir and the distinctive characteristic of our location here can be expressed the best. And we prefer doing of that handful of varieties we have, 3 whites and 2 reds, different interpretations, showing various faces those varieties can have without adding many more, because we prefer do well what we already learned and what we already can. And for us, it is also very important to learn or experience even more vintage by vintage what the strengths but also the weaknesses of all our vineyards are. And only by taking notes, obviously, also of all the experiences and all the observations, we are able to build up our cultural package and sharpen even more the profile of the wines we do.
I guess it's a good time to talk about the fact that the wines are presented in, what is it, 3 different lines?
Yep.
And let's talk about that, because you can take a varietal and Marcus can express it, different
Yep.
ways. So you start with, how did you pronounce it again?
Medievum.
Medievum is, how would you describe that? As kind of a wider
Yep.
level, an open level, and entry? I don't want to use any negative words,
Yep.
like cheap or entry,
Yep.
but in a sense, it's less costly and it's more of an entry.
Actually, for us, the medievum wines, medievum is the Latin term for Middle Ages, underlining the historical reality which we have. And the medievum wines are wines for which we use mostly the grapes from the youngest vineyards we have, as the idea is to make a very varietally typical, fruit-driven and floral style that expresses what the variety stands for, obviously considering that it comes from Alto Adige, respectively from our territory. So
Right.
it's sort of a wine for daily consumption idea.
But a great expression of the varietal.
Yeah. And-
Very, very drinkable.
And very drinkable,
young.
and also this alpine brightness, which they show really well, this
Brightness, freshness,
acidity backbone that gives you also an idea of standing on a high mountain peak and enjoying the picturesque view on a beautiful fall day. So
Right.
somehow this pureness and the vertical element of those wines, which are totally vinified in stainless steel, because we do not want to add aromas coming from the storage container.
You want to retain the freshness.
Absolutely.
And all right, so then we move along to your next level, which is higher quality.
Yeah, Praesolis.
Praesolis. We're all talking the same varietals in all
Yeah.
these groups. But what's the difference with what you're doing there? You had mentioned you use younger vines for the other level.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to use the older vines,
Yeah.
which have more character. What else?
Older vines, hence by nature lower yields, sorry. Normally harvested also later. Obviously, the weather god has to be on our side, otherwise it gets tricky. And partially vinified in oak. So those are more our terroir wines, where we really want to show what the element volcanic soil and this combination of Mediterranean climate, but still alpine influences, or vice versa, alpine climate with Mediterranean influences, makes with the varieties once they are grown over here.
Right.
And the oak actually is used especially for structural reasons, so not to convey a specific aroma. And for us, it's especially important to ferment and mature part of the Pinot Bianco and the Sauvignon in oak, because the oxidative atmosphere, without doing malo though, gives you a creamier texture and also
But you're leaving
higher
it on the
aging
lees
potential.
for a while, right?
Actually, we leave most of our wines, even the fresh medievum ones, as long as possible on the gross lees. Obviously, the aromas need to be good, and the continuous tasting has to be convincing. But actually, for us, the lees, respectively the yeast, is the mother of every single wine. And if the mother is good to you, why should you abandon her?
That's right.
So lees are natural conservants. And if you have a good lees, it helps you to evolve the wine without using too much sulfites, without continuously changing or over-controlling temperature in your cellar. So it really helps you in life, but obviously you need to
Right.
treat your mother well.
Right, of course. And then there's a Renaissance line, which I guess is a special line.
Renaissance is
Not
a
all
very...
the wines are made
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
Correct?
Actually, Renaissance is made just of the 3 leading varietals we have, or specifically those
Which
varieties:
are Pinot Noir,
Pinot Bianco and
Pinot Bianco.
Sauvignon.
Right.
And those are varieties our heart beats the most for, we have to say, or where we think that the terroir here really is extraordinary for them. And those varieties, and the Renaissance stands for the rediscovering what the potential of the area is, but also what the way of the vintner is, because for us, Renaissance means it's the complete harmonious package. It's the soil, it's the climate, but it's also the decisions the vintner takes in the vineyards as well as in the cellar to make those particular wines.
So could we cover that quickly? In the vineyards, I guess you're practicing a traditional cultivation, right? And people say, well, what is that? Is that organic? Is that biodynamic? You know, are you spraying? How are you farming? What's traditional cultivation? How you do it here?
So the technical term would be we are conventional vintners. We have nevertheless a very sustainable approach, and we want to be as nature friendly as possible, which means for us that if a treatment is needed to protect the plant and to guarantee harvest, which at the end of the day is what we make a living from.
That's a last resort, though?
Yeah, we are doing a treatment. At the moment, technically, due to the steepness of the sites we have, but also the narrow terraces of ours, we can do treatments just with small chain wheel machinery. So we are right now too slow to practice organic viticulture, although it would be a dream to us. And we were last December on a study trip visiting many producers, many friends of ours in Baden. They've already started using drones for the treatments, and Marcus immediately stated that he would absolutely be interested in volunteering for a first trial, because this for us would mean much more security for the vineyards we have, and also a better life quality. Because for us, doing a treatment means minimum 20 hours on that little machine, which is something you would never ever do once more than it is absolutely necessary for your vineyards. So just to allow you to understand that we do treatments if necessary, but we are for sure not having fun driving back and forth in the rows, spraying something not necessary.
I'm glad to hear that. So always looking for innovation, what other people are doing, which is a great thing. All right, Judith, we have to wrap up. We've been talking for a while, but I've been asking everyone the same question at the end of the talk. And the question is, what makes Alto Adige wines so special?
For me, Alto Adige wines are unique because they are wines that show the great symbiosis of Mediterranean influences and an alpine environment, and hence a context and a terroir where you can do wines with savor and elegance. And that for me is what Alto Adige stands for as a living environment, but also in the glass, respectively in the bottle.
Well said. And we're going to end on that. So I want to thank our guest, Judith Unterholzner. Judith is one of the proprietors at Gumphof Winery. Thank you for sharing your wines with us. Thank you for the tour, of which I almost rolled down the hill. So thank you to Judith. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Leave a review if you like the podcast. Follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby and on Twitter @BenRuby. You can always find us on both using the hashtag #TheGrapeNation. We are on Facebook at the Grape Nation. Thank you to our guests from the Alto Adige region. Thank you to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. Also, the EU. This campaign was financed by EU Regulation 1308/2013. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.